Okay, this will be a response to semasiologistics and his anti-natalism debate video.
Okay, so this is going to be a video that I'm making to, so this is a video I'm making for Deterministic 1 and his argument. Premise 1, it is not ethical to arbitrarily put another in harm's way. Premise 2, procreation arbitrarily puts another in harm's way. Conclusion, procreation is not ethical. Sorry, false, wrong, news, done. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Okay, you don't even address the argument, right? You're just going to go on with the rest of you. We're going to go on about reductio ad absurdum and all this other crap, but you don't address the argument. I mean, I made some specific statements. Do you agree with them or not? Premise 1, it is not ethical to arbitrarily put another in harm's way. Agree or disagree? I mean, that's what we need to talk about. If my premises are true, my conclusion is likely true. It's pretty simple. Premise 2, procreation arbitrarily puts another in harm's way. Do you agree or do you disagree? And the conclusion of those two simple premises is procreation is not ethical because procreation arbitrarily puts another person that you create in harm's way. You're opening the door to harm. You're creating a person that you state later on in the video that you're going to try and protect. Well, the best way to protect them is to not create them. If you don't create them, they cannot be harmed. When you create them, they will be harmed. There's no question about it. So, do you agree with my premises? I mean, that's what I need to know. But I guess, I really need to know if you agree with the premises. Yeah, well, you see, the question of morality only exists because of sentient life. Before sentient life, the question of morality didn't matter because there was no sentient life. With sentient life comes the question of morality. So, yeah, as long as there's sentient life, we have a question of morality. How should we conduct ourselves? When sentient life goes extinct, questions of morality won't matter because sentient life is gone. The only reason that we have a question of morality is because of sentient life. Well, that's not a problem with the argument. You got to tackle the argument itself. Do you agree or disagree with the premises? Not the consequences of the position. I mean, the consequences immediately is that when you don't procreate, you don't create a problem. When you procreate, you're just creating a problem. Why create the problem that doesn't need to be created?
It doesn't matter if you're talking about non-existing or existing agents. Non-existing agents can only be considered if they are potential agents.
Well, they are potential. I was potentially an agent, and then I was an agent because my parents decided I should come into existence. Why? I don't know, because they're both dead. I never got a chance to ask them why they did it, but there we are.
Meaning that they will come into existence. If they won't come into existence, then they are nothing and they can't be considered.
Sure, they can be considered. That's what you're considering when you're deciding whether you're going to procreate or not. Should we just leave the egg unfertilized, or should we fertilize the egg? And why should we fertilize the egg? Once we fertilize the egg, we got a problem. We got a new life coming into the world. It's going to have needs. It will suffer in some way, shape, or form. It may suffer quite a bit. It may suffer a little, but you don't know. You're rolling the dice for somebody else, and that's not ethical. That's my point. I mean, just because eventually the question of morality won't matter, doesn't matter now. Now it matters. Questions of morality matter now because of sentient life. I mean, we have these big brains. We can think in the abstract, okay? We can think of things that don't exist. And things that don't exist can't be harmed. That's simple as can be. Only things that exist can be harmed.
You cannot consider the state of a thing that will never exist, and also does not exist, and has never existed.
I mean, you're talking about it right now. Sure, we can talk about it. We got these brains that can think in the abstract. We can think of all kinds. We can imagine gods. I mean, right now, most of the planet, most humans believe in some god. Most of those that believe in some God believe in the God of Abraham. Last 2,000 years, which you talked about, yeah, things have improved over the last 2,000 years, but they could have been better if it hadn't been for those jokers believing in this mythical God. I mean, even now, you can point the finger at the believers of the God of Abraham for a lot of our problems.
So if that you can't consider it, you can't talk about it.
We're talking about it now. You're talking about it. Sure we can.
It doesn't have a state, it doesn't have an action, it doesn't have a time, it doesn't have a matter, it doesn't have a form. It is no thing.
So we can talk about it still. You're talking about it. I know what you're talking about. We're talking about things that don't exist. The things that don't exist cannot be harmed.
So there's no point in talking about it.
Sure there is.
If you're talking about, and that NIP problem, that non-identity problem, if considered in that way, really is a problem for your argument.
How is that a problem for my argument? You're not addressing my argument. You're going off on something else, and you're not talking about the thing. My argument is what you first said in the video. You're not addressing that. You're talking about other things. I made a simple argument, and you're not addressing it.
You can't say that it would be better for those things. The comparison doesn't work.
Well, sure it does. Non-existent cannot be harmed. Only the existent can be harmed. That's the thing. You bring somebody into existence, they can be harmed. And that's what's so strange about procreation. Job one. Once the baby's here, protect it from harm. When you simply open the door to harm, it's just to create a need that doesn't need to exist. Create a need. Try to fulfill that need as best you can, and sometimes, well, more often than not, I mean, just satisfying the need would be a pretty, what's the word? Well, yeah, it is futile existence. I mean, just satisfying your needs would be a pretty miserable life. We need more. We always want more than just fulfilling our needs. We have desires to do more. And we always want more. Till the day we die, we'll want more. Anyhow.
You're comparing things with non-things from the perspective of the things. I mean, what are you comparing? You're not comparing anything. So if you're talking about taking away the bad by stopping birth altogether, yeah, you're making a statement about morality that leads to no morality.
Well, it leads to the question of morality not needing to exist. The question of morality only exists because of sentient life. Once sentient life is gone, the question of morality is moot.
So that's absurd.
No, what's absurd is inflicting harm arbitrarily on another person. That's absurd. You know, what we got going on right now is absurd. The whole history up to now is absurd. The non-life on Mars absurd? Is that, look at Mars, well that's just absurd. There's no life there. That's absurd. No. Life is absurd. Lack of life would be just nothing, I guess, would be the right term. But there's no question of morality on Mars. Only with sentient life do you have a question of morality.
The point of making moral statements is to inform those agents that use morality, sentient creatures.
Exactly.
And this, as most people would agree, humans. So humans will say, okay, we're really dumb, okay, fine, whatever, but we're going to say that only humans have morality, right? And this little...
Well, yeah, I mean... When you're talking about right and wrong, this is what morality is, humans are really the only ones that can talk about morality. You need language to talk about morality. The other animals don't have that. They just do what they do. Pretty much what we're doing, but I mean they don't. And they're just trying to survive, period. I think what separates us from the other animals is the ability to think in the abstract, think about right and wrong, make up things like God, which is kind of a useless word. People think that some intelligent creator is responsible for this mess. Yeah, we are different from the other animals.
As big as the universe is, the Earth is small, right? And that oxymoron should show you how absurd it is.
How is that an oxymoron? The universe is big, the Earth is small. I don't think that's an oxymoron. Whatever.
To think that it is only our system of right and wrong that exists anywhere.
I don't see how that really matters. It's the only one we know of, and we can discuss right and wrong, proper behavior and improper behavior.
But, well, if we're going to say that, fine. The universe would be somehow better. Well, who would it be better for? What would it be better for? You have to have agency for morality to exist. If you're just going to say that morality...
it seems like you're saying that morality, questions of morality must exist. Why? Why do questions of morality need to exist?
It exists independently of sentient things. You have to demonstrate that. I'm
not saying that. I never said it's independent of sentient creatures. I'm saying it is dependent on sentient creatures.
Otherwise, it's just arguing from assertion.
Again, go back to my argument and tell me if those are just assertions. Do you agree or do you disagree with my arguments, my premises?
So yeah, if you want to say that, fine, say that.
I'm not saying that. You're saying that.
I don't know what it's better or worse for. If there is no thing that exists, if only matter, time, and space exist, then where's the morality come in?
Like I say, without sentient creatures, there's no question of morality. So,
and that doesn't, to me, it doesn't make any sense.
That's because you're going away from my argument. You're trying to make it sound like, you're making it sound like there needs to be questions of morality in the universe. There needs to be sentient life. I'm saying there doesn't need to be sentient life. Because sentient life just creates problems. There's no problem on Mars. There's no problem on the moon. There's only problems that we know of here on Earth, and the problems have to do with sentient life.
Maybe somebody can respond in those terms. Also, let's see here. I think it's wrong to assume that because we don't choose this desire that we have to live, that we shouldn't be given the choice. Like, it seems like a problem for libertarianism or libertarianists. A libertarian argument here would be that you don't really have the right to tell me, as my previous parents before I existed, that I wouldn't have wanted the desire that I have now.
Likewise, you can't tell me that I would want this. That's the whole thing. You're taking a risk by procreating. There's no reason to bring someone into a world that's harmful. This world is harmful. And it's for no reason. I'm just existing because my parents, all of us are existing because our parents decided for us that it was a good idea. And it's just futile. You're producing nothing. And, you know, I don't know what else to say about that. Yeah, you can't decide for someone else. You can't draw. I mean, when you're procreating, you're basically drawing straws for somebody else, and that somebody else might get a short straw. I mean, I guess you got one of the longer straws. You say your life has been mostly good. Well, good for you. But that's not always the case. Sometimes it's very bad. And in every case, it's unnecessary. We're not doing anything except bringing up questions of morality, you know, right and wrong, preventing harm. I mean, everybody wants to prevent harm, but for some reason, when it comes to the ultimate prevention of harm, not procreating, it's like we're asking you to barbecue a kitten or something. No, just don't procreate. I don't see why that's too much to ask.
Right? Because for you, as much as you, right, well, first we have to define what you are as a thing, right? As what we are as things. What we are as things are things that exist. And what we are as things generally are things that want to exist, right?
No, well, I mean, I'd rather not have been. If my mom's egg hadn't been fertilized, I never would have known. I wouldn't have missed out on this wonderful life of working my ass off and getting very little for it, and then getting laid off after 13 years. I mean, is that what my parents wanted for me? They wanted this miserable existence for me? Is that what they wanted? I would hope they didn't. I would hope they wanted the best for me, but it didn't work out that way. So, yeah, basic argument. You're drawing straws for somebody else, and that's not ethical. Birth would be good for us. See, I don't get that. Well, birth would be good for us if it was a good world, I guess. If it was a fair world. If it was a just world, but it's not. So, again, we're talking about procreation. Is it good for your progeny? You're drawing a straw for somebody else. So yeah.
That we are also, as things that exist and as things that want to exist, we are also things that will die, right? So
so why bother?
If we don't want to die, if we want to continue existing, hopefully forever somehow.
I guess existing in this existence? No, thank you. I don't want to live in this world forever, that's for sure. I mean, the thought of dying isn't exactly pleasant, but escaping this world is attractive.
However impossible that may seem to us now, with the knowledge that we have now and the insight that we have now and the technology that we have now, all prefacing how impossible it seems to us that we should live in a way that seems to defy time. And as insane and stupid and dumb as that seems to you, who wants it to be that way with the understanding that you have, the only way we can skirt that problem is to give birth. That's the only way that we can do it. So,
no, we won't be doing all this stuff. We'll be procreating, making a new creature that, as of right now, is going to die. It's not going to live forever. And in fact, no one can live forever because this planet will one day be lifeless. So this whole thing I should just ignore, but whatever.
We exist, we want to exist. The only way we can continue existing in any form is to give birth.
Now, we're not going to continue to exist. You and I are not going to continue to exist. Okay? We're going to give some of our genes and some of our partner's genes to a new creature who may or may not appreciate this world. There's reasons not to appreciate this world. If you don't agree with that, there's nothing to talk about.
We, as things, the second part, as things that exist, the second part are things who want to exist. Therefore,
we keep saying we want to exist, but we weren't given the choice. And if I could have gotten a preview of this life, I'd have said no thanks. Just leave me the fuck alone.
The things to which you give birth will also want that. They
Maybe.
want to exist.
Maybe. You can't say that 100%. So you got one person right here saying this is a bunch of shit.
Something else that we create, something else I should say, is that when we create something, it's not something that we want to create into pain, that we want to create into acid fire.
But that's the whole thing. We're not talking about acid fire. Not everybody is born into acid fire, but they're born into, you're opening the door to harm. If you just leave them, them alone, if you don't fertilize the egg, that egg will go out of the woman's body with no harm done. The only way you can have harm is to procreate. Alright? That's just opening the door to harm. The amount of harm you don't know. Is it going to be a short straw or a long straw? You don't know. You're rolling the dice for somebody else.
But we don't want that. We want that generally. We want the best that we can give. If we give life, we want the best.
And sometimes the best isn't good enough. And if you can't accept that fact, there's nothing to talk about.
For that life. That's why
I don't know if you know, my mom died when I was 19. Okay, I don't think she wanted that for me. She didn't want her son to see her mom my mom die at 19. I don't think she wanted that. That wasn't the best for me, not by a long shot. Okay, you just have no control of the situation. You just don't. Unforeseen events. Shit happens.
That's why we take care of it. That's why we nurture it, etc. So we don't want pain and suffering. And pain and suffering...
If you don't want pain and suffering, don't have it. There's no, I mean, there's no rational reason to procreate. I mean, I haven't heard it from you. You're just saying, you know, we want to live forever or some silly crap. Give me a real good reason for procreating.
Happens, well, that we can better that. We can challenge that.
Yeah, but you're it keeps going back to you're drawing a straw for somebody else. You don't know what's going to happen. You're hoping for the best, and most of the time it's mediocre. Sometimes it's really bad, and very few times it's really good.
Above and beyond the fact that there is no higher purpose that we are obliged to answer.
Who says anything about a higher purpose? I'm just looking for a purpose. You know, what is our purpose besides reproduction, consumption, cannibalism, addiction?
That we even understand, that we can say exists. Above and beyond that, what we have to satisfy for ourselves. One, we exist, we like existing. To create is the only way that we can...
you know, he keeps saying we, who, you know, you like existing. I don't really like it. I mean, I'd like to check out, but, you know, one, it's just kind of, you know, the idea of offing yourself is just kind of repugnant to a sentient creature. I have a family. You know, I had a family before I became an anti-natalist. I have a son. I've imposed this existence on him. He's going to grow old and die just like the rest of us. So he didn't need to. Yeah, so saying we like, you know, say you know, define we. It's not everybody.
Not die in a sense of death. Death is a philosophy in and of itself, a concept that you can that has different definitions. So the death that we think about, resuscitation of the brain and the heart, definitively, that definition of death, resuscitation of life, the only way we can get around that is by having birth. So those 3 points.
No, we can't get around death by procreating. You keep saying having birth, procreating. We can't get around death by procreating. We're going to die whether we procreate or not. We're going to go on. We're going to live as long as we live whether we procreate or not. We don't need to procreate. We need to breathe. We need to drink. We need to eat, and we need shelter. That's what we need. We don't need to procreate. We procreate because we have sex, but we, as opposed to the animals, have figured out how to stop the procreation process. We can have sex without procreating. We've figured that out for a long time now. So we don't skirt death by procreating. We just make more death by procreating. The more we procreate, the more people are going to die. People you care about are going to die. Okay?
Work together to say that our purpose as an entity is all that we should be expected of. If to talk about objective moralities or objective purpose, what else should we be expected to do? It's not. Yeah, sure. Take a comparison of compare a life in Norway today with a life in Norway 2,000 years ago. Who do you think? Look at the life expectancy. Look at the social education. Look at the liberties. Look at the technologies. Look at the expectations, and impose those expectations on both people. Now, you could ask the same questions 2,000 years ago as you could today, and assuming that we make it 2,000 years more, you can ask the same question in 2,000 years. So you can't really deny people of progress. You can't deny us of the progress that we've made, and you can't deny that life has gotten better.
The only way it can get better is if it was kind of sucky before, right? Yeah, it sucks now because it's going to get better. It's always going to get better because it sucks in the now.
Right? Also, when you talk about the good that you would produce by necessitating life, ultimately, by stopping all sentience completely.
Not producing a good, or preventing a harm.
It would be better for us in the sense that we wouldn't be producing any harm, right? And it would only be better for us. But if you say that there's this objective morality, then also you have to say that, well, wait a second, because you haven't produced any harm, right? You haven't produced any harm.
You prevented harm.
But you've also stopped good. You've also...
Well, if you're preventing harm, that's a good thing. So I haven't stopped good by preventing a harm. So you're going to talk about pleasure now.
Stop pleasure. You've also stopped...
Yeah. So what? I've stopped hot fudge sundaes. I've stopped the Olympics. I've stopped American Idol. I've stopped F1 racing, which is something I like to do. So what? Screw F1 racing. Alright? It's F1 racing, yeah, I like it, but it's totally ridiculous. The amount of money that's spent, the salaries those drivers get is insane. Okay? Screw pleasure. Pleasure has no value in the face of the incredible suffering that's going on as we speak.
You stop pleasure. In life, in my one life, I can definitely say I've had more pleasure than I have pain.
So what? And there's other people that have more pain than pleasure. I mean, in the pain, the suffering, the suffering has more weight than your hot fudge sundae, okay? I mean, really, the incredible suffering that has gone on. I use the example of I mean, children get kidnapped, raped, and murdered. Name me some pleasure you've had that counters that suffering. Okay? If you can't, I don't think you can. I don't think anybody can do that. Suffering is inherent in life. When you procreate, you ensure suffering when you procreate. If you don't procreate, you're ensuring that there won't be any more suffering. You're not going to create any suffering.
Yeah, sure, yeah. There are moments, there are things about life that I don't like. There are things that I have to learn to deal with.
Yeah, why, I mean, why should anybody have to deal with this? There's no reason for it. Why should we have to deal with this? Why should we have to cope with this stupid existence?
If to not experience pain. Sometimes it takes time to learn that, yeah, there are different degrees, there are different states, mental states in life that we have to endure or learn about.
Exactly, and that's what you're imposing on people. Why? Why do you think, why is that a good thing to impose this having to deal with life on somebody? What's the point? I really don't get it.
Theories that aren't always fun, joy, but that aren't always suffering and agony either.
Yeah,
just
whatever.
Boredom, which sucks for people, because most people, that is kind of a defining point. You know, people can't be bored. I mean, if you look at a cow, it's just always bored. It doesn't care. For us, we can't do that. So yeah, in that sense, boredom sucks. But I definitely wouldn't categorize that suffering. Like,
So what? But there still is suffering. I mean, it's like you're trying to minimize real suffering that happens. You know, fuck boredom. We're talking about suffering. You know, either it's suffering or it's not suffering. And there is suffering in the world. all the suffering occurs because people procreate. Right? The only problems in the world are problems with sentient creatures. We create problems and we try to solve the problem. Sometimes we can't solve the problem. But we definitely create a problem that doesn't need to be created. There's no need to create the problem.
If I look at my life and I say, okay, is there any way that I can cancel out the suffering with the good? Yeah, in some cases I can, and I'm sure that there are a lot of, if you look at most life, most sentient life, there's probably more suffering. Yeah, that's true. But with progress,
well, how can you, what's this, you said you could cancel out the suffering with the pleasure. How? How do you do that?
If we can make life better, and we already have, we've already made it so that a lot of people can say reasonably that they want to continue experiencing life, because to experience life...
How are they reasonably saying that? You're just saying they want to exist, therefore it's reasonable. How is that reasonable?
Is to experience, at least sometimes, pleasure. If we can continue that progress, ultimately we will have produced more good than the good that we would produce by stopping sentience forever, and in the process presupposing any benefit, any pleasure, any good that comes about.
See, pleasure and good, I mean, preventing harm is a good thing to do, right? But pleasure is something completely different. Pleasure is not necessarily doing good. Pleasure is just making life not boring. But preventing harm is a good. Pleasure is just, you know, satisfying your desire. It's not necessarily a good thing. It's good for you, maybe, because you feel good. But preventing harm is a good thing to do.
Help of progress. So, yeah, I mean, there are lots and lots and lots of arguments that people can make to stress why the focusing on of this one value is wrong, is illogical.
Well, name one.
But those are a few that I bring up that I think are valid. I don't think that humans are obliged to answer some higher purpose.
We're not asking for a higher purpose. We're asking for a purpose. Why are you procreating? What are you trying to accomplish in procreating besides ensuring more harm, more misery, more death? You're just, I've said this one before, you're sitting on a mountain of skulls and saying, we need to create more skulls. Basically is what you're doing. When you procreate, you made another person is going to die. It's going to be another corpse. You know, if you don't procreate, no new corpse.
I don't know where that comes from. Why is that what we have to answer? I mean, it's kind of a question.
It's a big question. You're making a new person. That's a pretty big thing.
Question that you've assumed unfairly, that you've imposed on people unfairly.
Well, it's really, we're not asking you to barbecue a kitten. We're asking you not to procreate, because when you procreate, you're ensuring more harm. Sure, they might get a long straw, but they might get the short straw. You're drawing a straw for somebody else. Yes, we want you to answer that question. Why should you be allowed to draw a straw for somebody else? Is that too much to ask?
You know, if you say that, well, what's the point then? What's the purpose? Well, the purpose is to be found out.
Well, no. Find the purpose first, then procreate. Give us the purpose. Don't just, oh, well, I'll procreate and figure it out later. No. You don't need to procreate. Unless you got some, purpose besides, I don't know what besides. There's no besides. Why do you need to procreate? Why do you need to draw a straw for somebody else?
Purpose is to be made. It's like when people say, I don't know what to do with my life, and someone comes along and says, you got to figure it out, man. You got to make a purpose. You got to do something and make it.
Why? I mean, well, make my own purpose. I mean, I didn't make myself. Why do I have to make a purpose? How can I come up? I mean, the only purpose I can see is to keep myself alive until I die and try to have some fun. But again, why are we doing this?
So if our purpose is to become God,
what the hell is that? Our purpose to become God? What is God? Define God.
Is to be able to travel at light speed. If our purpose is to just explore, why is that a bad purpose? What makes that wrong? What makes that...
You can do whatever you want, but if you're going to if you're going to draw a straw for somebody else, I want to know what you're doing that for. Why are you drawing that straw for somebody else? You can go on all the adventures you'd like. I don't really care. If you fall into a trap door, that's your own business, but you're drawing a straw for somebody else, and they might fall into a big old trap door, and then what are you going to do? There's no undo button.
So to say that everything's, and it's also part of the vocabulary that you use, but those are a few points.
Well, you're not even addressing my vocabulary. You've gone off all over the place. You've never addressed my argument. Do you agree or do you disagree with my premises? You need to address that.
So procreation is definitely not bad. It's definitely not unethical, and I think
that's an assertion. I mean, you're drawing a straw for somebody else, and you're saying that is ethical? It's okay to draw a straw for somebody else. It's okay to gamble with somebody else's money. You're saying that's ethical.
Its most basic problem is the reductio ad absurdum problem that I brought up in the beginning.
Again, you're saying that the question of morality needs to exist. I say it doesn't. The question of morality doesn't need to exist. It only exists because of sentient life.
If you want to really make the only sentient universe of which we know utterly absent of anything sentient, that makes for an amoral end, which utterly contradicts the making of the statement at all, since the grounds in which the statement is made are moral grounds.
Yeah. Moral grounds because of sentient life. That's the only reason there is morals, is because of sentient life. You're saying there needs to be sentient life. That's basically all you're saying. There needs to be sentient life. There needs to be questions of morality. No, there doesn't. The only reason there is questions of morality is because of sentient life.
For human interaction.
Yeah.
So, yeah, again, if you're going to talk about utility, you have to talk about consistency. Inevitably becomes a problem, and you can't consistently make that one value better than any and all other values. It will never.
I can say suffering has a value, a negative value, and pleasure has no value as far as I'm concerned. Pleasure is not a good thing. Preventing harm is a good thing. That's what I'm saying. Why is eating a hot fudge sundae a good thing? Why is that a good thing? It's a pleasurable thing, not necessarily a good thing. Some people might not like hot fudge sundaes. It's not,
would work that way. So yeah, go ahead and respond if you want. Be mad, be angry, do it, whatever. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, well, I mean, you got all the stuff written here. I don't know if I probably already had a half hour or more. But there was some things I wanted to address here. I mean, you're talking about me being inconsistent, but you're right here in number 3. One of the things we humans do is make the world better for our children. Unfortunately, in some ways, we also make problems for them. Are those consistent statements? We make it better, but we make problems. I mean, maybe I'll address these in a separate video because I think this is already pretty long. Anyhow, thanks for watching.